The night my driver missed my exit, I thought he'd just fallen asleep at the wheel. He'd driven me home from the hospital every Thursday for 3 years. Same route, same silence, same seat. But that night, he drove right past Millbrook Road, just kept going, into the dark. When I said his name, he didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just said,
"Miss Dana, there's something I've been carrying for 2 years that doesn't belong to me." That sentence. I still feel it, not because I was afraid, because somewhere underneath my ribs my body already knew, the way bodies know things before the mind gives them permission. He pulled into a parking lot, turned off the engine, reached into the center console, and handed me an envelope that my own mother had paid him to keep sealed forever. What was in that envelope would trigger a county deed audit, freeze my brother's investor negotiations, and force my family into a mediation room, under fluorescent lights, where every carefully kept lie would have to be explained out loud. But before any of that happened, I had to decide something. Was I doing this for justice? Or was I doing it because I was furious and heartbroken and had nowhere left to put it? I'm still not completely sure of the answer. This is that story. The Invisible Daughter. I'll give you the background fast because you need it, but I'm not going to drown you in it. My name is Dana. I'm 38. I manage hospital administration in Raleigh, North Carolina. I fix things other people break and rarely get thanked for it. That sentence describes my job. It also, as it turns out, describes most of my life. I grew up in a house with 2 children, me and my younger brother Colt. By the time Colt was 8, my mother had already made her choice. Not loudly, not cruelly, just quietly, the way some parents choose. Colt got the warmth, the assumption of capability, the benefit of the doubt. I got the expectation of competence, which sounds like a compliment until you realize what it actually means. You're the one who handles things, and handling things is never celebrated. My father, Gerald, was different. He built a small textile finishing company, a warehouse off Route 64, about 20 employees, regional furniture contracts. Not glamorous, but solid. And he was proud of it in the way that good men are proud of things they built with their hands and their patience. When I was 14, he let me help in the warehouse on weekends. I learned how to read invoices, how to track supply orders, how to talk to the guys on the floor without making them feel managed. Colt was there sometimes too, but he'd disappear after an hour, bored. Dad never said anything about it. But I noticed. And I think Colt noticed that I noticed. When I was 26, my father had his first stroke. Colt was in Phoenix. He flew in for the weekend, sat at the kitchen table, said, "Whatever you need," and flew back. I stayed. I rearranged my life, took a position in Raleigh that was a step down from Charlotte, and moved 11 minutes from my parents' house. 11 years of that. Medication schedules, therapy appointments, insurance appeals, neurologist visits, night alarms, the paperwork that never ends when someone is slowly losing pieces of themselves. My mother was present. She cooked, she sat with him, she loved him. I'm not taking that from her. But the administration of his illness, that was me. And through all of it, I told myself, this is what you do for people you love. You don't keep score. I should have kept score. My father died 4 years ago. October. Afternoon light through the window. I held his hand. Colt landed at the airport 2 hours later. 6 weeks after the funeral, the will was read. The house went to my mother. A small cash amount, a few $1,000s, split between Colt and me. And the business, the warehouse, the equipment, the company name, the commercial property deed, all of it had already been transferred. To Colt, not in the will. Before it. 14 months before my father died, there had been a notarized deed transfer removing my father's name and placing the business assets entirely in Colt's ownership. I sat very still when the attorney told me. Then I asked who the notary was. He checked the document. Read me the name, Raymond Okafor. I wrote it down in my notebook without reacting, because Raymond Okafor had been driving me home every Thursday night for 2 years. I want to tell you what happened in the car ride home from that attorney's office. I want to tell you I was calm and strategic. But the truth is, I sat in my car in the parking garage and cried. Not the pretty kind. The ugly, chest-aching kind that comes out when you realize you've been living inside someone else's decision about your worth. That everything you gave, every rearranged year, every insurance form, every night alarm, had been quietly, administratively dismissed. And nobody thought to even tell me. After a while, I stopped crying. I started thinking. Because I am very good at thinking when I'm angry. Let me tell you about Raymond. He'd been driving late hospital shifts in our area for 6 years. I started requesting him specifically because he understood what tired people need, which is quiet. After 12-hour days, I didn't want conversation. I wanted darkness and movement and someone who wouldn't make me perform. Over time, very slowly, we'd exchange a few words. I learned he had 2 daughters in college, that he'd come from Lagos in his early 30s, that he'd trained as a paralegal but pivoted to driving because the schedule worked better with his girls, that he did notary work on the side because it paid quickly and required no commute. I started bringing him ginger tea in a thermos on Thursdays. He had a chronic sinus condition. I'd heard him mention it once. He never asked. I just brought it. He always thanked me with the same quiet genuineness. Nothing performed about it. I had never connected him to my family's paperwork. Of course I hadn't. You don't expect the man who hands back your thermos to be the one who pressed a seal onto the document that erased you. But after the attorney's office, his name sat in my head like a stone. I went home that night and pulled up the county deed records, found the transfer, found the notary stamp. Raymond Okafor, license number, date. The same date my mother had told me she was taking care of some business paperwork and asked me not to come by because the house was being cleaned. I didn't confront him. I didn't cancel my next Thursday booking. I just waited, watched, brought the tea, said goodnight. Let him be whatever he was going to be for 2 more months. And then came February, cold, dry, one of those Raleigh winters that can't decide if it wants to commit to anything. I'd had a brutal shift. Compliance audit, 3 staff grievances, a 2-hour meeting that should have been a text message. 9:47 p.m. I got in Raymond's car. He handed me the thermos. I said thank you. We drove. I was looking at my phone when I realized the streetlights were wrong. The sequence was off. We'd passed Millbrook Road. Raymond, you missed the exit. He didn't apologize. He said, I know, Miss Dana. I just need a few more minutes. That stopped me completely. Not the words. The way he said need. It wasn't distraction. It was someone who had rehearsed something and was finally ready to say it. He pulled into the parking lot of a closed hardware store. One of the overhead lights was flickering, the kind of yellow sputter that makes everything look older than it is. He turned off the engine. His hands were on the wheel. I noticed they weren't quite still. He reached into the center console. Slowly, like the object had weight beyond its size. The envelope was worn at the corners, not new. He'd been holding it for a while. He set it on his lap and didn't hand it to me yet. I did not know who you were, he said, when I notarized those documents. Your mother told me she was handling a business transfer for her son. She said her husband had already made his wishes clear. She said, he paused. She said you were the daughter who had moved away, that you were not involved in the family business. I didn't speak. The first time I picked you up and you mentioned your last name, he said, I almost ran a red light. He turned to look at me. Full eye contact, which Raymond almost never did while stopped. He usually stared straight ahead. I kept telling myself I had done my job correctly, that the document was legal, that maybe she was telling the truth about you. He paused again. But you kept bringing the tea, and you talked about your father sometimes, just small things. The way he used to check the warehouse locks twice, how he smelled like coffee and machine oil, the way you described him. His voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. I knew that whatever your mother told me was not the truth. He handed me the envelope. I held it without opening it for a moment. I was aware of my own heartbeat in a way I usually am not. Inside was a photocopy of his notary log, his personal record. Something he did as a habit, not a requirement. The full entry for the signing date, both signatures, a legal description of the property, and a handwritten note in his careful, small handwriting, recording what the notary record doesn't require, but he had marked anyway. Primary property owner not present at signing. POA grantor named Gerald Mercer. Cognitive status of grantor not verified. I read it twice. Then I asked the question that had been waiting in my chest for 2 months. Why now, Raymond? I saw your brother in the business paper, he said. He's taking investors. If he does that, if it becomes something bigger and the foundation is wrong, and if you never knew... He looked at the flickering parking lot light outside. I don't think I could keep picking you up and living with that. I sat with that for a long time. Then I said, my father, did he seem... I didn't finish the question. Raymond understood it anyway. He was not there, Miss Dana. Only your mother and brother signed. I was told he had already agreed. I took them at their word. He said it quietly, the way someone says something they wish they'd questioned sooner. I opened the car door, stood in the cold for a moment. Then I looked back in. Thank you, I said. For the tea. He almost smiled. Thank you for making it ginger. My sinuses have genuinely improved. I went home. I spread everything across my kitchen table. Raymond's notary log, the estate documents, the copy of my father's power of attorney, the neurologist's notes I'd requested as part of my own records, because I had been his medical coordinator, and I had access, and something had always felt incomplete. My father's third stroke had been 18 months before he died. The neurologist had documented the aftermath carefully. Impaired executive function, difficulty with complex financial reasoning, increased susceptibility to influence from familiar figures. The POA had been activated 14 months before his death, 4 months after that assessment. I stared at that gap for a long time. Then I did something I haven't told many people. I picked up my phone and started recording a voice memo, and I just talked to my mother, to the empty apartment. I said things I would never say in person, that I felt like I'd been used, that I had given everything I had and she had watched me do it and decided it didn't count, that she had described me to a stranger as someone who left when I was the one who stayed. I recorded for about 4 minutes, then I deleted it. Not because I didn't mean it, because I knew that if I was going to do this, I couldn't do it from that place. Anger has a smell that courts and attorneys can recognize, and it doesn't help you. I went to bed. I didn't sleep well. In the morning, I called a real estate attorney, not the family's attorney. Someone I found through the hospital's legal aid directory, a woman named Patricia Osei, who handled deed disputes and estate litigation. I got a consultation. I brought my folder. She looked at the documents for 20 minutes without speaking. Then, your father's neurological assessment was done 10 days before this POA activation? Yes. And it noted impaired capacity for complex financial decisions? Specifically that phrase. She set the folder down, looked at me steadily. Ms. Mercer, there's a problem with this transfer, a real one. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I have to ask you directly, what is your goal here? Because depending on your answer, there are very different ways to proceed. I thought about it honestly. I want the record corrected, I said. I want it documented that what happened was not legitimate. I don't know if I want money. I know I don't want to feel like I made all of this up. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Then we file a petition for deed fraud review, but I want you to understand, your brother will fight this. Your mother will call it an attack, and the county process is slow. This will take months, and it won't be clean. I'm not looking for clean, I said. I signed the engagement agreement right there. The petition was filed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the county had flagged the deed for review. By the following Monday, Colt's investor group had been notified that the property had an active title dispute. And then my phone started ringing. My mother, how could you do this to this family? Colt, you always resented me. You've always wanted to see me fail. My mother again. Your father would be heartbroken. I let most of it go to voicemail, not because I was calm, because I had learned during 11 years of medical caregiving that reacting in the middle of a crisis rarely helps anyone. But Colt's attorney was not going to let it stay quiet. 2 weeks into the county review, Patricia called me. They're going after Raymond, she said. I felt my stomach drop. Colt's attorney is going to argue that Raymond's log is unreliable. They're going to subpoena his full notary record for that year, every document he notarized, and they're going to claim he was careless, inconsistent, and that his personal notes carry no legal weight. Can they do that? They can try, she said. It doesn't mean they'll win, but Raymond is going to have a hard day in that room. I called Raymond that night, explained what was coming. Silence on the line for a long moment. Then he said, I have been a notary for 11 years. I have never had a complaint filed against me. Not one. Calm. Very calm. Let them look at the records. The mediation was scheduled for a morning in April. 3 days before it, Colt's attorney filed a motion to delay on procedural grounds. The county granted a 30-day extension. Patricia explained it was a standard tactic. Tire out the petitioner, make the process expensive and exhausting, hope they give up. I almost did. Not almost gave up the case. Almost cracked emotionally. I came home from work one evening, sat on my bathroom floor, which is where I go when things are bad, I don't know why. And I thought seriously about whether any of this was worth it. Whether I was doing this for justice or for punishment. Whether I was the person I thought I was or just someone who couldn't let go. I sat there for 40 minutes. Then I got up, washed my face, and called Patricia. We're still going, I said. Good, she said, because I just got Raymond's full notary record from the county. 11 years, clean as a whistle. Colt's attorney is going to have a very boring time with it. April. Government building, fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, no jury, no dramatic courtroom, just a conference table, a county mediator, our attorneys, my mother, Colt, and me. Colt didn't look at me when he came in. My mother looked at me the way people look at someone they used to understand. Raymond sat in the waiting room. He wasn't required inside, just available. He wore a gray suit. Looked more like the paralegal he'd trained to be than the night driver I'd known. He had a folder on his lap, hands still, eyes forward. Colt's attorney opened by being exactly what Patricia had predicted. Polished, professional, and aggressive. He argued the POA was valid, that my mother had acted in good faith, that my father, while in declining health, had clearly communicated his wishes, that the deed transfer was his final legitimate business decision. Then he turned to Raymond's log. Mr. Okafor, he said, though Raymond wasn't in the room, he was addressing the document, is a part-time notary who notarized over 200 documents in that calendar year. His personal handwritten notes carry no legal weight. They reflect his impressions, not facts. He smiled when he said it. A small, practiced smile. Patricia let him finish. Then she placed the neurologist's assessment on the table. The date. The specific language. Impaired executive function. Increased susceptibility to influence from familiar parties. Not recommended for complex financial decisions during recovery period. Then she placed the POA activation date directly next to it. 10 days. The mediator looked at both documents for a long time. Then she asked Colt's attorney to respond. He did, but the practiced confidence was slightly dimmer. Then Patricia said, We'd like to call Mr. Okafor. Raymond came in, sat down across from Colt's attorney, set his folder on the table with the kind of quietness that is its own form of confidence. Colt's attorney began, Mr. Okafor, you notarized over 200 documents that year, correct? 214, Raymond said. Yes. And in how many of those did you add personal handwritten notes? Raymond opened his folder. 63. I note any signing where the primary property owner or beneficiary is absent, where a POA is being used in place of a direct signature, or where I have any uncertainty about the context. So you flagged 63 documents. I made notes on 63. Yes. Has any of those 63 ever resulted in a legal challenge? 2, Raymond said. Both times my notes were cited as supporting evidence by the challenging party. Both times the original transfer was corrected. Colt's attorney paused. Both times? The mediator said. Yes, ma'am. It was a very quiet room after that. The mediator called a recess. Colt found me in the hallway. He looked older than I'd expected, not in a satisfying way, just tired. The way people look when the story they've been telling themselves starts to develop holes. Dana, he said, come on. What do you actually want out of this? I want the deed correction, I said. The transfer invalidated. The estate properly reopened. That kills the investor deal. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're doing this because you hate me. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I'm doing this, I said slowly, because for 11 years I managed Dad's illness and you called on Christmas. And then a notary told me I was described to him as someone who left. That's not hate, Colt. That's just wanting the record to tell the truth. He looked at the wall. Then he said, You were always his favorite. You know that, right? He talked about you at the warehouse, how responsible you were, how you actually understood the business. His voice was not cruel. It was flat in the way of old resentment. I spent my whole life trying to get even a fraction of that, and you don't even know what I was talking about. I stood with that for a moment, and I surprised myself, because instead of satisfaction, I felt something quieter and sadder. I wasn't his favorite, Colt, I said. I was just there. That's a different thing, and you could have been there too. He didn't respond. I went back in. Before the session resumed, my mother touched my arm in the hallway. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. He needed it more, she said, quietly, not angry, just explanatory, like she'd been waiting to say it. What? Colt, he always struggled. You were always fine. You had your job, your apartment, your routine. Colt, your father always made him feel second. I was trying to give him something that would make him feel chosen. She pressed her lips together. Your father would never have said yes if he'd been himself. I knew that. That's why She stopped. That's why She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I looked at her for a long time. Mom, I said. I wasn't fine. I was just quiet about it. There's a difference. She didn't respond, but her eyes changed slightly. It wasn't an apology. I don't know if it ever will be. But it was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. The mediation resulted in a formal deed correction. The transfer was invalidated on grounds of POA misuse during a documented period of cognitive impairment. The business property returned to the estate. Because my father's will hadn't addressed it, the transfer had already happened by the time he died. The estate went through abbreviated probate. My mother, due to the nature of the POA findings, was assigned a financial conservatorship. Supervised management of her assets going forward. Protective, not punitive, but she didn't experience it that way. I don't expect her to forgive me for it. Colt received a legitimate minority stake in the company as an heir. Not nothing, not what he had. The investor deal dissolved. As for what I did with my share, I sat on it for 6 weeks. I talked to Patricia. I talked to no one else. Then I called a caregiver advocacy nonprofit I'd worked with through the hospital. They fund legal resources, financial counseling, and respite care for family caregivers, the invisible people, the ones who rearrange their lives and absorb the complexity and never write anything down because they're too busy doing the actual work. I donated my controlling interest to establish an endowment in my father's name, Gerald Mercer Caregiver Support Fund. I want to be honest with you about how that felt. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt right, but right and triumphant are not the same thing. I still feel the loss, not of the money, of the family I thought I had, of the version of my mother I'd been hoping, somewhere quietly, to eventually reach. That version may not exist. I'm still learning to be okay with that. Raymond doesn't drive anymore. One of his daughters helped him get placed at an estate law firm as a paralegal, which is exactly where someone with 11 years of careful notary logs and a habit of writing things down belongs. I sent him a card. Just a short note saying I was glad his conscience was as healthy as his sinuses. He texted back. The ginger helped both. My mother and I don't speak much. I call on her birthday. She answers. We talk about small things. Colt and I haven't spoken at all. I used to think that was the saddest part of this story. Now I think the saddest part is that it didn't have to be this way. If she had just told me what she was planning, if she had trusted that I wasn't going to take something from Colt, if she had believed that a person who gives that much doesn't do it to win, but she didn't believe that. Maybe she couldn't. I still drive home from the hospital on Thursday nights. I use a different service now. The driver doesn't know me. I don't bring anyone tea, not yet. If you're out there doing the invisible work, the night shifts, the insurance calls, the medication schedules, the quiet years nobody photographs, I want you to hear this. You are not required to be erased gracefully. You are allowed to want the record to tell the truth. I didn't want their inheritance. I wanted the county record to say what I gave, and now it does, whether they ever read it or not.